Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Harry T. Stone presiding. This is On Trial, the podcast where we debate the merits of the movies, the positive, the negative, Lincoln Douglas style. And this is an American Whammy production, or at least it will be in short order. I am your prosecuting attorney for the evening, Mr. Mark Radulich, and frankly, I'm mortified. Yes, the mandated reporter is what they call me. And defending on the docket tonight first is Firestarter, as a matter of fact. Firestarter is a 1984 American science fiction horror film based on the Stephen King 1980 novel of the same name. The plot concerns a girl who develops pyrokinesis and the secret government agency known as The Shop, which seeks to control her. The film was directed by Mark Lester and stars David Keith, Drew Barrymore, Martin Sheen, George C. Scott. Firestarter was shot in and around Wilmington, Chimney Rock, Lake Lure, North Carolina. And as I said, defending this movie is the one and only from Asterisk 51. You love him, you know him. He's the punny. He's the Punisher. P-U-N, capital. Evan Bevins, how do you do, sir?
I'm doing all right, Mark. Thank you for entrusting me with this sacred duty.
So we were talking before the show started tonight. I said I wanted to do Firestarter because the new the remake is coming out this Friday as we're recording this, day and date in theaters and on Peacock. And I was like, okay, well that's an opportune time to go back and look at the first one. I've never seen. I had, up until I decided to do the podcast, I had actually never seen this as a kid. 1984 puts me at about 8 years old, and I would see it in the video store, as you were wont to do when you're my age. But I never watched it. I think around this time, the only thing that I'd seen Drew Barrymore in was E.T. and Irreconcilable Differences. So did you watch Firestarter as a kid? Were you aware of it? Did you only watch it for this podcast?
No, I had never seen it before. The book was sitting on my shelf, and being the way that I am, I felt like I had to read the book first. So when you reminded me we were doing this, I grabbed the book and read it first. But no, I had never read it. I think the first time I heard of it was actually in a Mad Lib.
Really?
You know, the Mad Lib books, noun, verb, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the first time I'd ever, and then for the longest time, I did not read any Stephen King books. At some point I had it in my mind, Stephen King stuff is satanic and therefore bad. And then a friend of mine in college said, no, I think Stephen King's actually a Methodist. And I started reading and loved him.
So tell me about the book. I mean, we can, as the podcast goes on, we can compare the book to the movie if you want. But I'm just curious, like, how does the book go? What do you think of it?
If you've watched the movie, you've gotten pretty much the Cliff Notes version of the book. It's very, very faithful. And a lot of it has a lot of the hallmarks of Stephen King. You know, somebody with a power they don't fully understand. There's horror elements, but maybe a little more sci-fi than you're initially thinking. Very rich characters. The first Stephen King book I read was Christine, which is about the demonic car or whatever. And honestly,
we covered that. We covered that on here. We did an entire triple feature dedicated to car movies, and that was one of them. Because it was anchored by Titane, which was about the movie but the girl who has sex with the car.
Oh, of course. I haven't seen that one.
Evan Bevins
but-
already regretting this podcast.
No, I'm sure that won't come till later.
Mhm.
But when I was reading Christine, the thing that really struck me was when the weird stuff started happening with the car, I was disappointed because the characters in the book were so rich and well developed that like I was invested in what was going on with them before the car started like killing people and doing weird stuff. So now Firestarter, the book, just like the movie, starts off, you're right in the thick of it, weird stuff's going on, but the characters in the book are just very, very three-dimensional, very, very well developed. And even though this book is, I mean, it's extremely short by most Stephen King standards. I mean, if I don't get 700 pages out of King, I feel like he was, loafing.
Like you had
on that
gypped.
particular novel. Yeah. I mean, they can't all be The Stand, but at least it should be desperation.
Sure. All right. So normally when Sean and I do one of these on trials, he does the production notes and then I do the plot and then we go into the prosecution. Like I said, I only just watched it today for the very first time. I did a little bit of reading up on some of the criticisms of it. I definitely have my own thoughts. But go ahead and tell me what you know about the production notes for this movie.
Okay. Well, this was actually originally offered to John Carpenter, who knows a thing or two about, horror, sci-fi type stuff, while he was filming The Thing. And now I'm going to Wikipedia to pull together what I've read here and there. But he hired Bill Lancaster, who's actually the son of Burt Lancaster, to adapt the novel into a screenplay, and Stephen King signed off on. But then a few months later, Carpenter hired Bill Phillips to write another version that would have had Richard Dreyfuss as Andy. Then The Thing came out and underperformed financially, so Universal, completely unaware that they had a cult classic on their hands, actually replaced Carpenter with Lester, who directed the version that we watched. He brought Stanley Mann in to write a screenplay that stayed a lot closer to the novel than the screenplays that Carpenter had commissioned. Now, even though his son was now two screenwriters removed, Burt Lancaster was actually supposed to play Captain Hollister, but he had to withdraw after heart surgery, so he was replaced by Martin Sheen, who at the time was not as old as Lancaster or as I imagine Captain Hollister to be, but Martin Sheen has the advantage of always looking like he's 60, no matter what point in life he's in. The film was produced by De Laurentiis. It was the first to be shot at his new studio complex in North Carolina. And like you mentioned, it was shot in and around Wilmington, North Carolina in the fall of 1983. It's actually the first film to be shot there after the commissioning of the North Carolina Film Office. And it was regarded as launching the city as a burgeoning hub of film and television productions. Yeah, I guess, according to Wikipedia, more than 1,300 film and TV projects have been shot at Firestarter. De Laurentiis had searched unsuccessfully for a Gone with the Wind style location to suit his vision of the film. He came across an issue of Southern Accents magazine, I'm sure you're an avid reader of, that featured the historic Orion Plantation. Yeah. Don't we all? Featured the historic Orton. I said Orion, the Orton Plantation near Wilmington. The producers traveled to the area for a location scout, decided the property would be perfect for the headquarters of the shop. He approached the owners and, to their surprise, asked if he could buy the property so he could set the home ablaze for a dramatic scene in the film. They declined, but they let him use the location for exterior shots, and they used a smaller scale replica of the main house for the fire scene. Orton Plantation has since been used in dozens of films and television shows and is now owned by Louis Moore Bacon. Yeah, Louis.
All right. So here's what happens in this movie. As college students, Andy McGee and Vicki Tomlinson participated in an experiment where they are given a dose of low-grade hallucinogen called Lot 6, like you do in college. When the other participants suffer terrible side effects, the experiment gives Vicki and Andy telepathic abilities. Vicki can read minds and Andy can control others to do and believe what he wants, though the effort sometimes gives him nosebleeds, limiting the otherwise very strong power. Andy and Vicki, now married, have an 8-year-old daughter named Charlene Charlie McGee, who has pyrokinetic abilities, the power to control heat and fire, and can also see the near future. Andy comes home from work and finds Vicky murdered, like you do, and Charlie abducted. The family had already suspected the government agency that sponsored the experiment, the Department of Scientific Intelligence, the SHOP, was watching them. The government wants to weaponize Charlie's powers because, of course, they do. Andy finds Charlie and rescues her by blinding the agents. And for the next year, they are on the run. The cops got their gun, and right about now, they're going to have some fun. Farmer Irv Manders and his wife Norma take in the pair. Andy tells Irv the truth so that when the shop arrives, he is ready to stand with them. However, Charlie quickly dispatches the agents when they arrive because, fire. They go on the run again, but Andy's power has weakened. They go to a secluded cabin and prepare to go public with their story. Unfortunately, the head of the shop, Captain James Hollister, sends agent and assassin John Rainbird to capture them and stop the release of information. To protect themselves, Andy writes letters to major newspapers unintentionally revealing their location. After capture, father and daughter are kept separated. Andy is medicated and subjected to tests and given drugs which decrease his powers. Meanwhile, Rainbird pretends to be John, a friendly orderly employed by the shop to gain Charlie's trust and encourage her to submit to the tests. Charlie's powers increase exponentially. She continually demands to see her father as they promised. Andy is revealed to be faking the acceptance of his drugs, so his powers have never decreased, and it was all a ruse to make Hollister drop his guard. Once alone on a walk from the house, Andy uses his power to get information from Hollister and arranges to leave with Charlie that night. He slips Charlie a note when she immediately tells John Rainbird about the escape. Since he has wanted to kill Charlie since first hearing about her, he hides in the barn so he can kill Andy as well. Charlie enters the barn first, and Rainbird succeeds in convincing her to begin the climb up the ladder to him. His plan is foiled once again. Andy enters, and Charlie instead runs to her father. She tells him that John is present and asks if they can take him with them. She is saddened and angered to find out the truth, yet believes that Rainbird when he states he will not kill her father if she comes to him. To save his daughter, Andy orders the still mind-controlled Hollister to shoot at Rainbird. However, Rainbird kills Hollister, after which Andy, using his powers, causes Rainbird to leap to the ground, breaking his leg. Rainbird shoots Andy in the neck, fatally wounding him. He then fires at Charlie, but she detonates the bullets and engulfs Rainbird in the ensuing fire, killing him. Andy, mortally wounded and dying, pleads her to use her powers to bring the facility down after he dies. The entire security team arrives, and she eliminates them one by one with her powers and makes her way off the property. Charlie hitchhikes back to the Manders farm and is welcomed back. Shortly after, Charlie and Irv arrive in New York City to tell their story to the media. All right, Evan, let's get down to the meat of this, the meat of the matter. This is not an interesting movie. It's very flat. It lacks dynamic performances, dynamic direction. It just kind of feels like almost like a made-for-TV movie adaptation of a Stephen King story. If you think about, the premise of a father and daughter with superpowers on the run from a government agency, like an X-Men comic, there's so much more you can do with this. There's so much more gravitas that you can give it, so much more action. And I don't know if it was a style of filmmaking from when did they go into post-production or production rather?
83.
I would assume this was 83. I don't know if it's a sign of the kind of filming techniques in 1983 that were just limitations, but the film just feels very static at times. I think everyone's like giving their best. Charlie Sheen is trying damn hard in this, as is
Martin Sheen, who actually appears in the movie.
Sorry, Martin. Shut up, Martin Sheen. George C. Scott and Martin Sheen probably give the best overall performances in this, and they are trying with the material that they're given. But I feel like the direction didn't do them any favors, and so while they're the two best performances, their performances are still not super great. Drew Barrymore is also trying her damn best. This is no E.T. or Irreconcilable Differences, for that matter. And, when she goes full X-Men at the end, again, I was thinking about my complaints about Iron Man at the end of Civil War, where I wish instead of always being cooler than Jesus, Tony Stark, that he had let out some emotion after finding out that the Winter Soldier had killed his parents. You know, you shoot her dad dead that she's been on the run with for the entire length and breadth of this movie, and she just kind of zombie walks forward. And, you know, she burns the bullets and she sets everything on fire, but she's sort of doing this and then, you know, and again, in almost a semi-catatonic state, which that's fine if you want to tell that story. I'm not arguing with the plot point so much. I'm saying it doesn't show up great on film. I needed rage. You know, I needed her to just go full on, I'm killing everybody up in this piece, you know, just and holding her hair and just, you know, I needed her to do a, you know, Kamitami Ta, you know what I mean? Sure, you can, something like that. People who like watch this stuff, who watch Dragon Ball Z and Street Fighter, are like, what did he just say? That's not how you pronounce any of that. But you know what I mean? I want, you know, the movie ends with her doing, the movie ends with her doing like magic missiles everywhere. Like, come on, just kind of give me a you know, she's just like walking. You know, I'm like, all right. It's a 2 hour, I think it's 2 hours. 114 minutes, just about 2 hours to get to the finale. I mean, she burned stuff here and there. There's a lot of just making things boil at points. But, you know, she has the bit where she sets Heather Locklear's oven mitts on fire, which is pretty cool. Also, like, shocked that Heather Locklear was even in this. I was like, "Whoo, it's Heather Locklear from Melrose Place." I was titillated.
I think it was one of her first movies.
It might have been. But yeah, I was super overjoyed to see Heather Locklear because, yeah, it's all building to this big explosion, and it's underwhelming because I feel like if they had let Drew Barrymore just go for it, you would have gotten a memorable performance. Instead, she's just zombieing around the room, around the field. I mean, Robert Winfrey, if he were here, would complain that I am married to conventional narrative. I mean, and as I've said in previous podcasts, there's a reason why it's conventional, because it works. I think you have to be very careful with the idea of flashbacks and jumping back, you know. I don't know if the story was served by dropping you in the middle of them running from the shop only to go back and tell you the story of how they got there, then go forward, then go back, then go forward, and then they're just forward the whole time. I also never got a strong sense of what the shop was. I wish there had, and I don't know if this is in the book or not. I might be inventing something out of wholesale cloth, but I wish I had gotten a true menace, the true menace of the shop. You know, them just kind of verbalizing, we want to weaponize her. Well, have you weaponized anyone else? Is there something you can show me here? It's a talky movie, but not an interesting movie. And I'm curious now to see what they're going to do with the new one, because I'm wondering how many people have made these same complaints to where they took them into account when making the new Firestarter. But overall, to sum up my prosecution, I think this movie stands guilty of not being particularly interesting, underusing the premise, underserving the premise, and not giving us very dynamic performances. You're a witness.
Okay. Well, first, I'd just like to say I'm a humble man, maybe a bit outmatched by the more experienced prosecutor here. So I'd like the online jury to think of me as a slightly older Matthew McConaughey in A Time to Kill, or a slightly older Matt Damon in The Rainmaker. Maybe even, as my T-shirt suggests, a less experienced Matt Murdock. Basically, I'm a plucky defense attorney named Matt. But, you know, we're really here to talk about Firestarter. The movie, yes, but also the book, because I don't think you can really separate the two. Mr. Mann, the screenwriter, not a sarcastic name I just made up, certainly did. Okay, yes, but don't be distracted by the promise of CGI and Zac Efron on Peacock. Okay, you got to consider this movie on its own merits as a product of its time, which I think is why maybe they didn't go a little crazier with the powers and the effects. Honestly, I was kind of surprised by how much fire we did get. I was kind of, expecting it to build toward the big climax, and that the incident on the Manders farm, those were some pretty good blasts with the cars and things like that. So and you also got to think of it a little bit as a period piece, because it would unfold a lot differently in the age of smartphones and social media, which I couldn't really tell from the preview if the new version will be modern day, but I kind of expect them to take that into account. So one thing that's really hard to do with Stephen King books when you're adapting them for movies and TV, no matter how many times people do it, is to squeeze everything in there. They're so dense and rich with characters and detail. I read one of his newer ones, The Institute, and the first 90 pages is about a guy who doesn't show up until, the end of the third act again. But once he does, you know why he's doing what he's doing. Mm-hmm. That works a lot better in books than it does in movies. So the stuff that's left out, but the adaptation works as much of it in. I like the way they drop you right into it because, in theory, you could kind of build up the menace and everything, but this way you sort of feel their confusion. And, you saw the poster, it's called Firestarter. You kind of have an idea of what's going on as you're coming in. So I understand what you're saying there, but I think that works. And then, they do a good job filling in the background. And even though it is a talking movie, there's times I think they do a good job of, if not showing instead of telling, at least telling succinctly. That extends the details, like the fire extinguishers that you can see throughout their house in the flashback when he finds Vicky. They don't hit you over the head going, we had fire extinguishers in every room, but they make sure as he walks through the house, you see, and you get an idea of how they're living. Mm. The dialogue's clunky at times. And Andy activates mental domination powers by, just plunging his hands into his mullet. That's a little awkward. But I think they actually did convey a lot of the emotions, especially Drew Barrymore. A lot of times in movies, you get kids who seem like little adults, even younger than they. He was right in between that, like an actual kid. They had a lot of lines straight from the book. One that gets me is when the agents are coming up the road at the farm. She looks at her dad and says, "Okay, if I use my powers, will you still love me?" I don't know that. That got me in the dad feels. Now maybe that adaptation and the stuff they pull from it doesn't work as well if you haven't read the book. Maybe that's what helped me get past some of the weaknesses. But I appreciated the fact that the writer and director did fix something that wasn't broken. Now, like I said, Stephen King puts a lot of details in, so at times this felt a little fast-forwarded. When Andy's at the shop, he actually loses the power because they drug him, and then he finds a way to develop it and hide it from him, whereas in this, he was like, "Oh, I don't have my powers. Oh, wait, I guess I do." But, for the most part, that was necessary to keep the movie from dragging. Rainbird... I've already seen articles like, "Hey, the new Fire's fixing it because they've got an indigenous actor playing Rainbird." And even when you bring in General Patton himself, I see why that would rub some people the wrong way. Maybe they should have just changed his name because I think George C. Scott did a pretty good job of making him intimidating. Although I will concede he's a lot creepier in the book. Well, they say more menacing in the book. He's plenty creepy because they don't explain why he's so fascinated with Charlie in the movie until very late. And then it's just kind of like, I want to kill her and maybe find out about her power. And it's a lot more dark and disturbing in the book. Like I said, the effects were a lot better than I expected. I thought we were going to get one cheesy inferno at the end. The fireballs, which were actual flaming things on strings, I read, that was a little weird. Charlie her blowing up the bullet when Rainbird shot at her, that worked about as well as it could. But then when the bullets just started sparking and exploding, I did kind of start to roll my eyes, but I have accepted for years that the Human Torch isn't bulletproof. the bullets just melt before they reach him. So I had to give it that one.
Can I say that I don't need to raise an objection here, and I don't mean to talk out of turn in our format.
No, you're fine.
But it was something where the first few times they shoot at her and she just melts the bullets as they get to her. I honestly thought that she just had like a force field. Like
it looks like a force field.
Yeah, I thought she was able to somehow project a force field made of invisible fire or some shit. I accepted that. But and that's not even my problem with it, because I will have in a movie about a pyrokinetic 8-year-old, I'm not real married to, well, physics doesn't work that way. I'm not that guy. But I did have a problem when they used it for what felt like an eternity, over and over and over and over again. Like, we get it. She can't be killed with bullets. Move on from this. Do something else.
Yeah, and I will give Stephen King credit. He didn't have any instantly melting bullets in the book. I guess my defense movie, because there are some issues with it. My defense rests on, this does an excellent job of translating the book to the screen. I watched the trailer for the new one, and I'm like, well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. But honestly, whatever you think about this version, to do something, because this one just translated the book about as well as you could do it without making it 3 hours long or a TV miniseries or something. And I'm not sure there's enough really to justify that. But the new one's going to have to do some different approaches, not only because some folks might find it more interesting, but because you can't really translate the book much better than they did. Yeah, you could punch up the effects a little bit, but if you're going to do a straight, completely faithful, strict adaptation, you're not going to make that big a difference other than better special effects and an actual indigenous actor as Rainbird. So, not a perfect movie, but it's faithful to a darn good book, and I ask you to find it not guilty on those grounds.
And what if she were white? No. I'm going back to your Time to Kill reference. Okay, so we can just chat now. This is the part of the story. Normally, like I said, Sean and I, whenever we do this, we'd be at 45 minutes by this point. So we actually have a little time to just kind of go back and forth. I didn't hate the movie. This is where you get my real thoughts. I didn't hate the movie. I just kind of found it bland, And I think I'm really interested in seeing the new one, because I think, as a premise, this is a fun idea. But I think you have to do more with it. You really have to go for it to fulfill the potential of the premise. But just judging the movie as it is and not comparing it to the new one that I haven't even seen yet because it's not out, or the book, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about your opinion. You're saying that this is almost a literal translation of the book. I think you can do the same movie, but it just, some minor tweaks here and there, and some changes to performances, better direction, and some enhanced special effects. Also, I don't know, what did you think of the pacing of this? Because I thought this was at almost 2 hours. This felt longer, and I'm wondering if there's a problem with pacing. And I say I wonder because I watched part of it at a friend's house today. Then I came home and watched it again like a few hours later, and I know I dozed off at one point. So is it me? Am I the drama? I know. Is it me? Was it not paced well, or was I just tired and not totally focused on it? What do you think?
Well, a lot of it, maybe it wasn't so great that I read the book first. Mm-hmm. I just, that's always my rule of thumb. Although honestly, I find that if I watch the movie first, then read the book, I like the movie. Mm-hmm. If I read the book, then watch the movie, I tend to prefer the book. So maybe I'm just, easily influenced by the first thing. I didn't have a problem with the pacing, but that's because compared to the story, it was a lot faster. So,
Okay.
like,
How big is
we're
the
there
book?
at the grandfather's. What was that?
How big is the book? Like how many pages?
It's not. It's not even 400 pages. But
Okay.
the timing, like they spend months at the Grand Cabin, which it really kind of changes the dynamic, and the shop finds them almost instantly. And after what happened at the farm, they're like, maybe we just better figure out a better way than pointing guns at the little girl who can blow things up with her mind. And so, like Charles and changes in that time, they really thought they were safe until they get this little twinge of intuition that something's coming. From there, it pretty much goes along like the movie where they capture, and then their time at the shop is a lot more drawn out. I forget how months, but again, Andy is like really loses his ability and can't figure out what's going on with it. And there's a whole thing where he realizes he's addicted to the drugs, and he's got to overcome that. And whereas in this, and again, they couldn't have really done this in the movie, because if you thought there was an issue with pacing, believe that would have really slowed it down. But it loses some of the emotion and the depth in that just that adds, because they're not it starts out at a breakneck pace, and then there's this lull where they change, and then you have captured, and then more changes and development. Like it takes Rainbird a lot longer to kind of get through Charlie's defenses. She's she doesn't trust anybody there, and I think the part where the power goes out and they're stuck in the room together is like the second time we see them together on screen. I know I'm sure it's implied, or it could be inferred, that there was more time, but Rainbird's a lot more deliberate, a lot weirder.
Rainbird has my favorite line of this entire movie. Rainbird has my favorite line of this entire movie. He's talking about like how he's going to kill Drew Barrymore. He's like, well, I'm going to punch her in the nose, and I'm going to send bone fragments into her brain. And I'm like, that's fantastic. it was one of those moments where
that's straight from the book.
Oh, is it really? I'm sitting there again. I was like texting people, and I was half asleep, and I was petting my dog, and it was dark out, and there were wolves after me. And he's just like, I'm going to feign that we're friends, and then I'm going to sucker punch her in the nose and bone fragment into her brain, and she'll die. And I kind of looked up from everything that I was doing. I'm like, like what the hell?
That's one of those that they pulled right out.
Yeah. Okay.
But they do. I mean, he is really unsettling, not just because he's this old assassin who's fascinated with this little girl, because there really is an aspect with his. I mean, there's no way his fixation on her is healthy or normal or acceptable, but there is an aspect where he really does care about her in a completely twisted way. But it's he's just obsessed with death. It talks about one of the reasons that he kills people, aside from being really good at it, is because he hopes when he sees them die, he'll get some clue as to what's on the other side. And then he thinks because of her power, she's connected to something. They don't in the book really explain, other than, Lot 6, the drugs and the parents' DNA mixing, why she has these powers. But they theorize that, not just, a Zippo in her head, that she's tapping into some fundamental force or whatever. So, and that's what Rainbird thinks, that he can finally learn the secrets of death with this girl who's, more connected to the universe than anyone else he's ever killed before.
Can we talk about the art of adaptation for a second? Because I've heard you say now a couple of times, this is a literal translation of the book. And I know from my experience with Lord of the Rings, we have a phrase on here. I was actually just telling one of our friends about this that I've met recently. So I don't know how much of my podcast she's been able to listen to, but she was asking me about my favorite movies and stuff, and I mentioned Lord of the Rings. She's like, "Did you read the books?" And I said, "Not only have I read the books, but I have gotten into near fistfights with people about where's Tom Bombadil? Where is he? I don't understand. Why isn't Tom Bombadil in these movies? Like he was the fucking star."
He lost his passport, couldn't get to New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, but people like, I don't know if you know this or not, Evan. That's not a setup for a joke, by the way. I'm not about to ask you to take a BDSM quiz or something like that. But like I did Jesse.
No, why would you do that?
Yeah, to you. First of all, I would, but I don't know if you'd ever talk to me again. Because I think you taking that quiz would almost be as funny, if not funnier, than Jesse taking it. But I digress. I don't know if you know this or not, but people get really upset, really upset when you don't do a literal adaptation of their favorite thing. And, you know, it's like, I found that if you don't like the Lord of the Rings thing, you know, Tom Bombadil, look at the Harry Potter books. My father said that like the first one or two of them are pretty close to the books. And then it's a cliff notes. The movies are cliff notes of the books going from the third one on.
Yeah.
There's so much detail
definitely.
that they
the
leave
first
out.
two are pretty faithful.
Right. And then, as you go on, they're taking bits and pieces of things, but they're not fully faithful. And there are people that would argue, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. People would argue that if you don't capture every detail from the book in your movie, it's a poor adaptation. And Robert and I have talked about this before. An adaptation is just that. You're taking the source material, like a comic book. You know, like Civil War wasn't a literal translation of the Civil War comic, as you know. They took the premise, they tweaked it for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they put it in the bed with Madonna, she slept with it, and then voila, you had this other Civil War movie that resembles in some ways the comic book story, but isn't a literal adaptation. And outside of my gripes with Tony and the Winter Soldier, it's a darn good movie. I posit, and this is where I want you to weigh in, I posit that sometimes I think you're doing a disservice to the source material by drawing out every single detail. You don't always need Tom Bombadil. You can give his stuff to the Ents and to others to keep the flow moving. You can, in fact, invent a whole character out of cloth, like you know they did with Steven Tyler's daughter, Liv Tyler, in Lord of the Rings, and give her stuff to do. Because, as my daughter pointed out, certainly is a lot of men in this movie. You know, where are the my little feminist daughter? She's like, I don't see any hero chicks in here. What's with the anti-women movie, Lord of the Rings? And I'm like, easy. He wrote it after World War I. There were no women at that time. You'll be okay.
So Maud Garrett in World War II.
Yeah. So I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on the art of adaptation.
I agree with you. You can't squeeze everything in. Especially, I mean, the first two Harry Potter books, to go back to your example, were probably the last two that you could fit in a movie that people would actually sit through. The third one, Alfonso Cuarón, who I've learned was a little too fascinated with the Dementors freezing things, but that's not the movie that's on trial here. No, you can't sacrifice the movie experience just to shove everything in. What I liked about this one is that even the changes that I didn't necessarily, for the things they left out that I thought took away from it, didn't hurt the basic premise of the story. I've seen some things where they make changes and I don't understand why. Obviously.
And how does this add to the narrative? How does this add to the narrative? What are we? Why was this in the movie? Is this a studio note? That sort of thing. I assume is what you're talking about.
Yeah. We may. There's a comic I don't know if you're familiar with called Life that they turned into a movie, and one day we'll talk about that. So I had questions about a lot of the changes.
I don't know when we're going to get to it. I'm really busy. I'm only going down to 2 days a week.
Yeah, we should do a podcast on that sometime. But anyway, if I can see why the changes are made, or if it enhances or works with the story, I'm okay with it. Like you brought up comics first, not me this time. So you can't squeeze 60 years of Marvel comics into one movie. So you go with the spirit of it. You go with the ideas. A lot of people are still mad that Jarvis was a computer program. Well,
oh my God,
people are mad.
People are mad that the Mandarin wasn't a racist Chinese caricature. People are mad that Tony didn't catch shrapnel in Vietnam. I mean,
it doesn't work. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that are mad that my personal favorite MCU character, Korg, isn't a big, boring pile of rocks and steals every scene he's in. But that's neither here nor there. I know you got a lot of Ragnarok fans on the network.
Almost everybody on the roster is a huge Ragnarok fan.
Yeah. Well, if I hadn't muted the chat because I still haven't seen Doctor Strange, I'd probably be muting it now anyway.
You haven't seen Doctor Strange meets the X-Men yet? There's this really cool scene where Logan shows up with Jubilee. Go ahead.
Okay, well, no, I'm sure it's all Mephisto anyway. But when are they going to recruit Charlie?
Wait a minute now. Wait a minute. We're good.
Okay. But no, I don't. I defended it based on the quality of the adaptation because, I mean, honestly, I'm watching it and I'm like, I was going back and forth because you were kind enough to let me pick, and I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel, and I finally landed on, you know what? They didn't butcher the story. They got the story right. They included the stuff I thought was important. No, it doesn't have to be faithful. I mean, Zack Snyder made a pretty darn faithful adaptation of Watchmen, and after it was over, I was like, well, that happened.
Yeah. That's actually a really good
Watchmen,
example.
I had already seen the visuals.
Watchmen's a really good example of an adaptation to where, and I think a good comparison is Watchmen and Civil War again, because Watchmen is almost a page-by-page adaptation of the book where they essentially just kind of tore the book apart, storyboarded each page, and that was your movie. And a lot of people walked away from the Watchmen movie going, this was boring as shit. And this feels a lot of problems people have with Watchmen is that it feels not only overly long, but not narratively coherent. It's not as snappy as it needed to be for the kind of movie that it was, as opposed to Civil War, which we talked about, where they took resonant issues that have happened in the MCU. I mean, there's that whole, the reason why they're making the superheroes register and be under the control of the United Nations is because not only did Wanda just kill people, but the Avengers have killed people before. I mean, Tony invented a murder bot. Shit has happened. And while I've argued to him blue in the face that, Ross's examples of like, where's Thor and the Hulk, as if you could control either one somehow, it's kind of, the greater point, I think, is made of, you guys have run around, and he says this in the movie, it's like, you guys have run around unchecked with no supervision and people get hurt. And maybe you need some guidance because, I don't know, maybe putting together a paramilitary terrorist team of superheroes is not a great idea. Taking the law into their own hands and just going off avenging people. So I mostly enjoy Civil War, and I think it's a really good example of, when you think about what Civil War was, it was a ideological fight between Captain America and Iron Man about consent and self-determination. And what was the movie Civil War about? An ideological debate between Captain America and Iron Man about consent and self-determination. So after that, it's like, do the details matter that much? To some people, they do. Some people take this, some people, Robert and I talked about this, I think 2 weeks ago when we reviewed The Northman. Some people take the stuff that they love in nerd culture, and that's their whole personality. So when things don't work out quite the way they will, it almost, it's almost an invalidation of who they are. So that you didn't put Tom Bombadil in the fucking Lord of the Rings doesn't hurt me personally, but for other people, it's a knife in the heart. And I'll give you the final say on Firestarter and the Art of Adaptation before we start heading out for the night.
Okay. Well, like I said, I enjoyed the movie. I'm not going to say it was without faults. And maybe honestly, it does help to read the book first. Maybe that smooths over some of the things, because you can
No,
fill in
Evan,
some
books
blanks.
are for burning.
Well, it's a good thing we have a Firestarter then, huh?
Oh my God.
Okay, that didn't work. I'm sorry. I didn't. No, I enjoyed it overall. I am kind of curious to see what they do with the new one, just to see, if they do successfully adapt it while going in different directions. I mean, there's certainly a lot that wasn't explored in the book that you can do. But I thought it told a good story and an emotional story that resonated with me, and the movie reflected that. So could there have been lines delivered a little more convincingly, especially by the government agents? Sure. I mean, even some of those guys got a little bit of backstory and personality before they were burned to a crisp in the book.
Sure.
So that adds to it. But again, you can't fit everything in, and the things that didn't make it in, I understand. I don't demand every adaptation be faithful, but I thought this one was pretty faithful, and I thought it worked.
All right, folks. We'll go ahead and call it for the evening. Normally, when I do this with Sean, I'm a scotch, and I say, obviously I won. I win all of our arguments because I'm so smart. But this is Evan Bevins, and Evan Bevins has never heard a fly, not a soul. He walks among the angels. So I believe we'll we'll get the verdict from the jury, and the jury says we love Evan Bevins, so not guilty. Seems a little loaded. That's all right. All right, folks. That is our review.
What are you going to ask me to talk about next? I feel like you're buttering me up.
No, dude. I'm trying to cut back. I had to cut stuff. Like we were supposed to. I feel so bad. See, now I'm trying to do plugs, but you're making me talk. I feel bad because in the great pullback of 2022, to where I laid out a plan to cut back from 87 podcasts in a week to just 2 by the end of summer. I had to just straight up cut people's shows, and some of your stuff got cut. And we talked about killing during one of my manic highs to where I wanted to do every comic book adaptation, and I was like, I'm going to do all of these shows with Evan. Because you're very one of the things that I like about you is how available you are at a moment's notice. So
there was water falling out of my ceiling. I'm sorry.
And we don't have to plan these things months in advance because of our crazy schedules. It's like I just call you and you just appear. I feel bad because we've had I Kill Giants on the schedule for a while now, and I'm like, I don't have time. I will never get to 2 shows a week if I do everything I promised I was going to do with people. So some stuff had to get cut. But I feel bad because I like recording with you. So no, I'm not buttering you up for anything yet. No.
Don't feel bad about I Kill Giants.
Okay, I won't.
I
will.
I
however,
found it at Dollar Tree. I'm going to use it as blog fodder, if nothing else. So
perfect. Well, maybe someday in the future, I'll have a reason to pick up another day, and we can revisit the idea. Or one night I won't want to do the Metal Hammer of Doom, and instead I'll want to do I Kill Giants. Who knows? All right. With that said, tomorrow we are going to be reviewing WrestleMania Backlash 2022. That'll be me and the Podsman in theory. That'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be streaming live here on W2M. And then in the evening, it'll be myself, Robert, Alexis, and David Wright reviewing Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Missed Opportunities. On Wednesday.
No spoilers.
Shut up, Alexis. Alexis, stop. Jesus. On Wednesday, we will be doing a review of Fozzie Boombox. Our Metal Hammer of Doom extra for Sane is currently up on YouTube. It's been up for about a week now. Everyone should check it out. I make Jesse Starcher take a BDSM quiz, personality quiz, which I would recommend everyone take. You find out a lot about yourself when you take these BDSM quizzes. Did you know, Evan Bevins, that what my top two are? Did you know that I was a 100% Primal Hunter, and 100% Switch, which kind of sounds like a D&D class, but it's apparently these are BDSM personality traits of some description. Don't you find that interesting? Aren't you glad I told you this?
Books. That stands for books, dioramas, Scrabble, and macaroons.
Yes. Make believe. The M stands for make believe. Lots of make believe in this community. Sure. You should absolutely take the BDSM quiz to find out what make believe personality you have, and then report back to me. Please answer a lot of the boy, girl, and age play questions with absolutely agree. Okay, I'm going to need you to do that for me.
I'm going to absolutely disagree right now.
1. All right, moving on. So that's up in the archives. Thursday, Evan will be back. Believe it or not, this was Evan Bevins week. Thursday, Evan will be back, and we'll be talking Moon Knight season 1. Are you caught up? Have you seen it all now?
I have.
Okay,
I couldn't dodge spoilers for that and Doctor Strange at the same time.
Fair enough. We'll be reviewing that Thursday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard. I'm 3 episodes into it. I have 3 more episodes left. Easily right now, the 3rd episode's the best one, but we'll see how 4, 5, and 6 are, and we'll talk about it Thursday. This weekend, we've got a re-airing of Money Monster starring George Clooney and Julia Julia. Damn it,
Roberts.
That's the one. Thank you, Julia Roberts. And then we've got on Sunday, we've got an Everyone Loves a Bad Guy re-airing. This is Animal Villains. Yes, sir. Animal Villains in movies and television. So that's all my plugs for this week. Go ahead, Evan. Talk about your blog. Talk about your... Evan Bevins and I are actually contributing to the Superblog team up that'll be going live on May 18th. And our contribution, the theme is the anniversary of Image Comics. Evan and I will be doing a comic strip on an Image comic, Term Life, which was adapted into a movie that nobody watched on Netflix, starring Vince Vaughn and Hawkeye star Haley Stansfield. So go ahead and do your plug, sir.
Okay, well, you can find my writing at asterisk51.blogspot.com, where I've already talked about some of the high lows of Moon Knight's career. Currently working my way through Secret Defenders, the greatest comic of the 90s you've never heard of, where Doctor Strange picks a random team from some psychic tarot cards, and right now they're chasing a serial killer across Route 66. His name is Roadkill. But I also get into some movies on there. You might see I Kill Giants on there one day. I like to see what I can find at the Dollar Tree, and if I can get through watching it. And see, you can also find at oh man, I wish you edited these like Jesse, because you could just cut this out right now. On Webtoons.
No, Evan, I like you raw and unedited.
It's even less than it sounds. But Webtoons, I wrote a webcomic called Support Group, about a support group for people with lame superpowers, in case your origin doesn't work out the way they show it in the comics. And that's where you can find me without all the ums and ahs and repetition.
He's got a few ums and ahs, and he takes a little pause in just the right places. Ooh, ah. You ever listen to NoFX? You a Cali punk guy?
Nah. Sorry.
All righty. Thanks, Chatty. All right, folks. Court is now in recess. We thank you for joining us here on Trial for Firestarter, starring Drew Barrymore. For Evan Bevins, the saintly Evan Bevins, who doesn't have to use some language tonight. I kept it clean. Chris, I kept it squeaky clean, like fresh out of the shower, clean tonight for Evan Bevins, so that he could show this to his mother and say, "Mother, aren't you proud of me? Mama! Mama, talk to me, Mama."
Only 2 F-bombs.
Did I? I thought I kept it clean. All right, folks.
You're pretty casual.
Thank you. like a hero. For Evan Bevins, I'm Mark Radulich. This has been On Trial on the American Whammy Network. Be well, be safe, and behave.